Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Lee from Connell PD. He has 24 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Lee. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. I was hoping that you could give a little bit of background. How did you get started in this career? Who is Chief Lee?
Well, that's a deep question. Well, to get started at how I got involved in the career is, my upbringing was probably a little different than most people. I had a very um, unstable childhood. Was put in foster care and everything else, and was kind of a problem child growing up. Nothing really bad, but was defiant, was acting out, and was doing those types of things. And my interaction with law enforcement at an early age was not necessarily favorable because of poor decisions and things that I was doing. But ultimately, one day when I was in the eighth grade, I had a contact with a deputy that because was holding me accountable to something that I was doing wrong, and was the first experience that I had with law enforcement that where he actually treated me with dignity and respect, and actually it showed me that there was a different way to the police and a different way to connect with people and resonate. And from that point on, I was like, that's what I want to do, and that's how I want to be. Is I want to be like that deputy. That although I was being a troubled teen, was being very derogatory and was negative towards him and everything else, and that's doing everything that I possibly could to push his buttons. To the whole time, he maintained his professionalism. Treated me very respectfully and everything else, and so it was from that point that I knew that that's what I wanted to do. And from that point on, it was kind of a changing moment for me in my youthfulness and defiance to kind of change paths and aspire to be something bigger than and greater than what I was doing. So I set my path towards that. I After high school, I went in the Marine Corps. I served for 4 years on active duty in the Marine Corps. It mostly just to bridge the gap because I knew I needed to have some time. I needed to have some work experiences, some life experiences, and things like that I could bring forth into the profession. And I wanted to be challenged, and I wanted to have something that I felt prideful with. And so that's why ultimately I joined the Marine Corps. And upon separating from the Marine Corps, actually before I left, was applying for law enforcement agencies, and I ended up getting picked up by Hanford Patrol, which is a nuclear. I don't know if you know much about our region, but part of the Manhattan Project is the Hanford nuclear site. And so they have their private security force that's regulated by the Department of Energy. I got picked up by them, so it's a security police officer. That's what my position was. At the same time, I was also a reserve deputy with the Yakima County Sheriff's Department, which is where the deputy worked that I got in trouble with, or that was correcting me on my juvenile ways. But ultimately, I worked there for about 2.5 years. I did 2 years as a canine handler. I was an explosive detection canine handler. So that occurred, 9/11 occurred that year, and that ultimately is what changed some things out in the area as far as security and protection, which opened up the door for me to become the canine handler. I had applied for the position and was selected, and I ran a dog for about 2 years, which is, when you talk about experiences and things that you get to do in your career, that's one of those that I'm a huge dog lover, and to be able to work a dog and have that experience was awesome. And if I could rewind time and go back to doing some of the things that you really love throughout your career, that's one of those highlights for me. But I felt like I needed to do more and be challenged more, and so then I applied for some local law enforcement agencies and started my municipal law enforcement career in 2003. Between that agency and another, before I got here, did all sorts of things. From I did a street crimes unit, did detectives, was in an undercover drug task force, was a discipline, or was an instructor in various different disciplines, defensive tactics and firearms, less lethal, those types of things. So various different instructorships throughout my career. Had many different assignments. Held the ranks of sergeant, lieutenant, commander, was over all different aspects of operations within the police department, even supervised or managed our radio communication center, which is in our area, it's a regional communication center. So we service, what is it, I think it's 15 law enforcement agencies and I take about 9 law enforcement agencies and 15 fire agencies out of that one communication center. And it's also unique in the sense that it's not only communications, but it's also the emergency management for the county that we're a bi-county communication area, but it services emergency management for that county side. So I got to experience that portion of it throughout my career as well. But most of my time was centered in being a trainer, either through various different disciplines or field training. And majority of that time was in defensive tactics, and so all sorts of stuff. So then in 2002, oh, sorry, my dates are off. 2022, sorry, COVID's got me screwed up with everything. Um, I uh, became the chief of police for Connell, which is a small community. It's a small agency. We only have 6 full-time officers and 3 reserve officers. But going from an agency that had 68 FTEs to now 6, poses some challenges and everything else. But it's actually been a great experience, and I've really loved the opportunity to be able to come to a smaller agency and experience it from this perspective. And yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. There's a few things I want to dive into that you said. One is your childhood, and I wanted to ask you a question about this because I have met a lot of people who are in the law enforcement and first responder profession who come from challenging childhoods. And I can also relate to that. I don't know if we talked about this offline because I don't think you shared
No,
this
I didn't.
childhood with me on this is the first time I've heard this, but I also come from a challenging childhood, and my parents were drug addicts, and I grew up with a incarcerated parent, and I too rebelled,
Mhm.
and it didn't start that way. It started with me trying to be a version that I thought everyone would love. And I was like, well, maybe if I'm smarter, or maybe if I'm funnier, or maybe if I'm more athletic, then people will love me. And, my parents will stop doing what they're doing and they'll like be good to me. And then when that didn't work, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to try a different strategy. And I don't think that necessarily was what I was thinking, but that's definitely
Sure.
what happened. And I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to start causing a scene and I'm going to do all the bad things. And when that didn't work either, because obviously it had nothing to do with me, right? Like this had
Right.
everything to do with them. But when that didn't work, I was like, all right, well, I'm just going to be real bad now because I felt like no one saw me or valued me or loved me. Do you think that with your childhood experiences, that deputy coming up to you and treating you with respect and integrity was that like feeling that maybe you were like searching for, and that's why it was so instrumental for you, was like someone being like, hey, I'm gonna treat you really well? Because like for me, like when you told me that story, I was like, man, like I would have given
Mhm.
anything for someone in my life to look at me and want me to do better?
Sure. I no, I can't necessarily say that. I mean, for me, it was, um, I think it was the ideal right time, right place, and
Yeah.
in the respect that he showed, even though I was being defiant and I was, like I said,
Mm.
every single button I could. Uh, it was a matter of seeing somebody that's in a position to actually affect change with somebody else and help them, guide them, even though they're being defiant and out of control. How can you do that while maintaining structure and discipline, all the things that you talk about? But there's more so there is a little bit of compassion, a little bit of relational aspect of there. There's, if I was to really dive deep into it, it was more so probably finding a connection, somebody that you can connect with and bond with
Yeah.
outside of, I had great foster parents growing up in the foster program. Um, so I didn't experience some of the troubles that some experience in foster care, right? Although I did have my experiences there, but the families that I stayed with for longer periods of time, and uh, even some of them today, they my children. That's another piece about me. I'm married and have 3 kids and one grandchild, but
Mhm.
my kids actually call my foster parents grandma and grandpa. That's who they know, and that's who they experience and everything else. So
Yeah.
not so much that For me, I think it was more of a bonding moment with somebody like a male role model that I could aspire to be and say, "Hey, I want to be like that person. I want to be able to help impact people that are at their in their worst times, or help a kid just like me that
Yeah.
was confused, lost, abandoned, that felt, non-desirable, not lovable, that those types of things. And how can I give back and support somebody else that may be going through the same experience that I was going through? And so I guess if I was to, go back and reflect on that particular moment, that's what it kind of resonated with me.
Yeah. I I really like that story a lot because it shows me like what shaped you as the leader that you are today. You know,
Mhm.
saying like I want to be like that guy and I want to help other people who are going through challenges. Do you think that you carried that with you throughout your career where you like remembered that and that impacted the way that you interacted with the community?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's those types of things. I can draw back and I can tell you stories about the negative interactions that I had with law enforcement, and that was, I think those were probably more powerful to remind me of don't be that, don't do
Yeah.
those things, especially in the kind of the day and age that we're in nowadays, where we have more of a divide between law enforcement and the community and the relational pieces. That's what really drives me as a chief and communicating with my officers is that how can we bridge that gap? How can we make that gap smaller and really resonating and being one with community? And some of that does come from the childhood and the experiences that I had, either on both on positive and negative sides of, hey, here's some examples of the bad things, and here's examples of the good things, and let's promote the good things and not do the bad things. So,
Yeah, I mean, you can absolutely learn from both always. I think that there's always a learning experience in negative and positive events and experiences. I also think that our most challenging times are our opportunity to help others because now you have that empathy, right? It's like, I know what that's like, and how can I now be someone who's a role model for you? Like, how can I now be something that's positive because you have the experience of the negative? And so I completely agree that you can learn from both sides of the coin. I think sometimes maybe when things are really hard, like we don't immediately know where that lesson is,
mhm.
and maybe it's not until later, like after the fact, that you can start to recognize that. Because, for me in my hardest times, like I wasn't like, yes, like, thank you. This is a learning experience for me, and I'm going to be so grateful for this later. I think that a lot of times it's like once you've gotten to the other end of those challenging things or those negative things that you can then reflect and say, okay, this is my opportunity to learn.
Right? Yeah, and it helps shape you. I mean, you don't see the benefits of it while you're going through it because it's hard, it's challenging, and you don't know why. I mean, for me, it's my faith basis is that I believe that God's giving me that experience or giving me that challenge for something future or something that that I don't know what it's going to be used for in the future. And so when I
Yeah.
look back at my childhood, and the experiences, my parents were alcoholics and abusive, both physically and verbally and psychologically, but so I didn't experience the experiences that you had, but I had experiences that maybe I can relate to somebody now in my capacity, and whether that's as relating to a child or relating maybe to the parents and saying, hey, how can I help in your addiction or in your struggles within your household, not necessarily in an enforcement capacity, but in more of an empathetic and a relational piece to be able to say, hey, how can I help you here and guide you and mentor or support you in a way that you know it helps your family dynamics and helps everything stabilize there. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's we can draw upon those personal experiences and apply those forward to help each other out.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, throughout your life and throughout your career, was there anything that helped you to process the things that you had gone through or, um, to prioritize your own personal wellness throughout 24 years in law enforcement? And the thing is that we have to remember that everyone does come from life, right? Like, so
Mhm.
if you do come from a childhood that is challenging, you have those stressors and that trauma, and then you enter into this profession and you have cumulative stress and trauma that builds up over time. Was there anything that you did that helped you?
So through different phases of my life and my career, there were different things. Younger on, I think that I was subjected to, especially being in foster care, being forced to go to therapy or to counselors and that type of stuff. And I was more defiant to that because I didn't understand it, didn't appreciate it. Also saw it as a negative because I'm being forced to have to do it compared to understanding what that resource was and why I needed to go and talk to somebody.
Yeah.
Although I had throughout my teenage years or early childhood, had some great therapists and great counselors that meant well. It just I wasn't in the right space to be able to accept that. Um, and then through the military, there were different phases where it was seeing different things or aspiring to want different things, challenging myself both academically and physically to make sure that I was in the best physical condition that I could possibly be in, and being in the right mental headspace and those types of things to be able to be effective in whatever it was that I was doing. And then throughout my career, it's back to again almost full circle as is that seeking out somebody, whether that's a peer friend or seeking professional help through a therapist and stuff like that, to be able to talk through some of the things that we're subjected to, or maybe even it's not even a critical incident or traumatic events, but you just don't know how to process through what you're experiencing or what you're doing. So there's been different levels all throughout my career. Um, you know, I I was fortunate enough at one of the agencies that I worked for. They, as a training officer, they sent me to the Force Science Institute to become a force certified force analyst, and I was really kind of taken back by that because it's a very, in my mind, it's a prestigious program, very prestigious honor to have attended, and I felt that I wasn't capable to have attended this because of the degree of difficulty that the program had. But it really changed my outlook. I mean, my college education, everything up to that point had all been centered around criminal justice. And I had always had a personal desire of maintaining physical health and being in peak physical condition. But going to that training was opened my eyes up to the whole other aspect of physical health and things that I could have an interest in. So I actually switched my degree field over from criminal justice to exercise science, and got my associates in exercise science with, I ultimately ended up with, I think it was 9 different certifications in various different things. Me and my wife started a personal business for consulting and personal training. I competed in all natural bodybuilding competitions and those types of things. So that was another aspect for me is how can I maintain my mental health by also being not fixated, but focusing on physical health, so I can be as effective as I possibly can. So if I'm injured or I'm broke or I'm incapable of doing something physically, how helpful can I be in my capacity as an officer and protecting the community?
No, I agree with you that physical and mental are so interconnected. One of the things I want to kind of circle back to, because I want to talk about your background in exercise science for sure. Um, but you brought up a really interesting point about being forced to do therapy, especially in your younger age, and maybe feeling like resistance to that. And one of the things that we talk about a lot on this podcast is like, how do we break stigma? How do we like make it normal for people to get the resources that they need within this profession? And one of the strategies that a lot of people talk about as being really successful is making it at least one time a year, like a mandatory where everyone is talking to someone and like maybe you don't need to talk about it, but at least everybody's doing it. So it's not singling anyone out, and saying like you're broken and so you got to go. And then people aren't like sneaking in the back door. It's like, well, everyone's doing it. But you have an interesting perspective of like maybe when you felt forced, feeling a little bit of resistance. What is your opinion on that? And like, how do we break stigma without people feeling like they're being forced to do something and therefore having that resistance to it?
Sure. Yeah, I'm full support of that. It's
Yeah.
even, my resistance to it was when I was younger, not so much as an adult. And as an
Yeah.
adult, I've sought, therapy and everything else. So it's because there's times that how do you process something? How do you work through something, and how do you get it from a constructive person that's actually there to help you? compared to, to a buddy where they may be going through the same thing that you are, and now you're both stumbling through it. And there's a time and a place for that as well. But
Right.
a huge believer in, we have to break the stigma. And one of the ways we break the stigma is by one, opening up and expressing ourselves, saying, yeah, it's perfectly acceptable. It's normal. It's great here to hear. Here's the person that I talk to. If you want to go to see somebody, so that way they can see, hey, not only that I'm doing it and that's okay and it's acceptable, then it kind of takes away some of the macho-ness, some of the ego that surrounds the stigma. I was a little resistant to that because I didn't like the idea of having to force somebody to go and talk to somebody. Um, but I actually like the concept now because of the things that you talk about. It gets rid of the poking and the razzing and even some of the stigma that goes with it, or the macho-ness of like, well, I'm never going to go talk to that person. Well,
Right.
if everybody's forced to have to do it, I don't care what you talk about with a person. You can just sit in there and stare at each other, but everybody has to do it. So then it takes some of that pressure away from those that are maybe wanting to do it but are insecure and they don't want to be picked on, or they don't want to be isolated or singled out. So it takes some of that stuff away. But I think by talking about it, and you take some of the taboo or the shameful feeling of it away, and you normalize it, that's one of the ways that we can really help move that pendulum in the right direction.
Yeah, no, I agree. I want to now talk about the exercise science because I'm really interested in this. And when you and I first talked, I'm like, you are an expert in this space. And so I would love if you gave some of your experiences through consulting and maybe some of the things that you're seeing that are unique within the law enforcement profession. Maybe like some of the challenges, some of the exercises or things that can help so that anyone who's listening has like some tactical um, information that they can take with them.
Sure. Yeah, I'm in no way, shape, or form am I an expert. So I'll say that right up front. I am not an expert. What really drew me to it is I wanted to be able to create a product. If officers are going through a critical incident, or if they've been subjected to something that is really taxing physiologically and psychologically on the body, what could we give them as almost like a protein drink or something like that, that we can give it to them to give them the nutrients that they need right then and there to help kind of stabilize them, bring them back into a, homeostasis physiologically as fast as we possibly could. So one of the ways that when we talk about mental health and stabilizing that is if we've got all of this trauma on the body, that's going to be naturally taxing on the psychologically on the mind. And when we look at chemicals and everything else, how can we stabilize that as much as possible? So that's what really drove me into looking at how, getting a degree in exercise science, because in order to create that product, I want to have an understanding of how does the body respond in the time of stress? What can we do uh, uh, as a training officer? What things can I do to implement into our training program to make sure that we are making sure that they're healthy when we're in training, or we're teaching them the best techniques in order to get compliance, or when we're looking at just the trauma of the job as it goes along, the stress of the job, how can we stabilize people to make them the best you as you leave every day, and hopefully at the end of a career, because the stress is cumulative, it grows, and it's, a lot of times we focus on the acute, the real immediate uh, trauma, or the immediate issues, but we don't look at the chronic stuff, the stuff that builds over time that we don't address because it's, oh, that's normal, or we try to rationalize it saying it's normal, or it's something that everybody experiences, when it is normal and it is something that everybody experiences. But how can we also address it through the career so that it doesn't end up to where we're debilitated at the end of our career, or the
Yeah.
stress gets so much that now we can't go to work. So that's what made me dive into it, plus my own personal interest in how can I develop myself and push myself physically to make the best me. Um, so a lot of times, through my wife and I's experience through clients so these were non-first responders clients, majority of them. And the struggle is that a lot of people want a magical pill, or they want a magical potion to be able to help out and make it, overnight, just change everything. And that's not reality.
It'd be
You've got,
nice.
you've got to work, you got to work and be disciplined and actually have that self discipline, self restraint to be able to do certain things. I never got to the level to where my wife was. My wife was actually a national level competitor with going for her pro
Um,
card. Um, I never got to that level because one is it's very difficult to do it all naturally, and I wasn't going to do anything that was going to compromise me physically or me and my morals or my ethics or even legally. Um, but how can I? So mostly it was is how can we create this product that would help officers immediately right there on the scene, give them something that gets them back and is going in the right path as quickly as possible. Then I discovered that I was going to be in school for a long time and I have to have multiple degrees in all different types of things in order to create that product. Plus, it wasn't going to be marketed very well to first responders. But then I could take that knowledge and then go down to the grocery store and get them something and apply that rather than actually creating a product.
mhm.
And then on the physical side of things, it was more so of how can we keep our officers. I always tell people I don't expect you to be a Jackie Joyner Kersey or an Arnold Schwarzenegger or anything, but how can you make sure that you are not wasting away and debilitating yourself because you're being inactive?
Right.
And whatever your activity level is, whether it's small or large, finding whatever that is to complement you. I don't know if that answered it, but
Yeah, it does. And I think that the goal is longevity. Everything that I'm hearing you say, like to me, like that's the word that kept popping up is like, how can we have tools and resources that are going to help with longevity? And I think that longevity is multifaceted. It's not a one singular thing, right? And so
right.
when we think about it, how can you have physical longevity? Because that's important, right? You have a very physical career. You have to be able to be and it doesn't have to be the most peak physical shape, but you do have to be in a physical um, shape that allows you to effectively perform the functions of your career. Um, and that means injury free, trying to reduce the risk of injury. I always tell people, like, if you don't bend, you break. Like, mobility is so important. And we want to make sure that when you get to the end of the career, like, you still have your body intact, right? You can still do
Right.
stuff into your retirement. And then the same goes mentally. How can we have mental longevity? And what are the tools and resources that we can implement so that you're less stressed, less burnt out? You want to show up and do the job, and you can, again, get to the end of this career and feel good mentally. And then we have professional longevity. And you have to have both the physical and the mental to have the professional longevity. And when you can have employees who feel better physically and mentally, they're going to show up and do a better job. They're going to make better decisions out on the streets. They're going to have a more positive, I shouldn't say positive, but more positive, mental attitude. And they're not going to want to quit. They're going to want to be there for a while. And then the reverse is true, right? If you have someone who feels like shit, I can say that, or it doesn't feel good, right? Can't move, their nutrition is poor, mentally they're stressed, they're burnt out. They're going to show up with a bad attitude. They're not going to want to do the job. They're not going to make good decisions. They're going to want to quit. And so, how can we proactively put in place resources that are going to help to promote that longevity? I'm curious if there was anything that you and your wife found that was really successful in, like what resources that you found were successful in promoting either physical or mental longevity, either in the clients that you worked with or as you started to introduce that into training at your department?
You mean like literature or something along those lines, or what do you
Or
mean by
just like
resources?
specific resources, like, breathing techniques or specific exercises, or I know you said like nutrition. Was there anything that you guys have found that was like really successful of like, yeah, like that works?
Um, so yes and no. So a lot of the times is, I mean, like I said from the get-go, I'm not the smartest person and I'm not an expert by any means. So I would rely on those that are truly the experts in their field. So
Sure.
rather than getting, the bro science and everything else, so dispelling some of the myths and everything else that go along with it, and then tuning them onto truly scientific, educated people that are experts in their field to guide them better than I can. But so it's more of being a conduit to get them to the right information, so then they're not misled or they're not doing old. bro science type stuff. But um, as it pertains to like I'm trying to think of it, specific resources that more so it was being a network and a conduit to people that actually that was giving them correct information rather than misinformation or a lot of times you see, especially in the bodybuilding worlds, there's a lot of cookie cutter diets and things like that
Yeah.
that we're bringing awareness to. Hey, because you saw this person in a muscle magazine and they have their layout of their routine and their diet, that isn't designed for you or isn't compatible with your body type or may not be right for you because of maybe some other medical condition that they're facing. And so talking to them about what is reality and our business motto or whatever is for you to look good in your genes, but spelling it as in genes, as in not as in blue genes, but as in your genetical genes.
Mm.
How do you get the best you possible? And
Yeah.
talk to them about reality of I can't make you look like something that genetically you're not going to ever be. So we have to be realistic in our expectations of what you can be, and we're going to get you there. And we'll be there as a partner and a mentor to guide you in the right direction. But bringing them back into what is realistically attainable uh, compared to what they saw in a magazine or what they see online or what somebody told them at the gym and those types of things. So that's
I
mostly
like
what we
that.
did.
I like that because it's like it's not a one size fits all,
Mhm.
and there's, I know you said it earlier, but there's not a magic pill, there's no shortcuts, right? But how can we put in place resources that are going to help you to be the best version of yourself and then not burn out trying to attain something that is maybe not realistic? Because a lot of times that's what happens, right? It's
Mhm.
like if you have someone who's looking at that, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, did I say that right? Schwarzenegger. Um,
Yeah,
and they're like, I want to do that.
right.
But like maybe that they'll never do that and they're just like working, 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 working to try to get there and then they never do and they get discouraged, they burn out and then they quit. And so I really like that. It's like let's do something that's realistic. Let's recognize that wellness isn't a one size fits all and let's give you the tools and resources that you need to be successful. So I
Right.
think that that's great. And I also think that and gosh, I think anyone who listens to all my podcasts are going to be so tired of this, but this is like my motto with anything for like forward movement is first is awareness, right?
Mhm.
It's like that's the first step is awareness of like, okay, and this could come from a lot of different perspectives, right? Like maybe awareness as an organization that this is important, awareness from an individual perspective of like, yeah, maybe I have not prioritized myself for a while, and maybe I need to do that. And then the second one is education. And that's what you said. It's like bringing in the experts, making sure that there's the correct information for each individual person so that they can thrive. And then the third one is action. And action is always the hardest part, right? And I think
Oh
we
yeah.
we oftentimes get stuck in this education cycle where it's like you're going to all these conferences and you're listening to all these podcasts and you're reading all these books and you're like inundating yourself with education. But then there isn't the follow-up of implementation. And
Mhm.
implementation takes a lot of hard work and effort and dedication. I never say motivation because I think motivation is fleeting, but it's like dedication and consistency, right? Like in order for, because it's a process. It's not like you said, like a really quick thing. It's something that's going to develop over time. And so I think that as a leader, you saying, hey, like I have an awareness that wellness is important. Here's some education for you guys. And then it's really up to the individual to then take all of that and implement that into their lives. And I think that that's the part that is maybe still missing for a lot of people because I think it's easy to be like, yeah, I learned this. But it's like, okay, well, like, did you get to the gym? Or like,
Yeah.
did you go and do that breathing technique or whatever it is? And they're like, well, no, like I'll do it tomorrow. I don't have time or whatever. So I think three steps, and oftentimes we get stuck in the education step. And so how can we then facilitate the actionary step?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And a lot of times, depending upon the organization or where you're at, some of that is just finding what I call champions, somebody that can take us from that educational piece and actually start moving into some action phase. And that action phase could be something simple as okay, we've got some additional literature for resources that you can contact, and or just the person that's out, hey, checking in with you, like, "Yeah, did you do anything today, or how's your water consumption, or hey, did you do something?" I'm You said it earlier about being flexible. I'm about as flexible as a two by four, so I'm terrible when it comes to that. And I know the importance of flexibility and mobility and everything else, but it's also one of those that it's
Yeah.
how do I infuse that into my daily life or into my routine? And full honestly, I haven't figured that out yet, even though I know the importance of it and everything else. But
Well, you're
I
talking to the right girl, so I could
I
definitely
don't
help you out with that.
I'm not there. So, but it's
Yep.
uh, also the same token is this, it's finding those champions, those people that can carry that educational piece to the actual implementation and action phase. And depending upon where you're at in that phase, may be different champions or different people that are going to now pick up the torch and run with it to the next phase, or different people that have different strengths and weaknesses. I mean, mine was never in the additional resources in the mental health phase. Uh, but I knew other officers that were, and so they had great resources and good connections outside of your typical EAP that most cities have, which they're not they're not they're good on a basic level, but they're not holistic. And so, how can we now build out something that's more holistic? And so, you bring people in that can help with that piece of it, and everybody in their little field of expertise or their interest, and it also brings ownership into that. So, in an organization where you may not have all the resources or all the funds to be able to do a major program, you can do little bits that actually go a long way, and everybody's contributing to it. And then you get more buy-in to it, and you get less resistance to it.
Mhm.
And everybody's participating in it, some way, shape, or form. It helps move it along a little bit easier.
And never underestimate the value of small steps over time.
Yep.
I really believe that, like small incremental steps over a period of time is going to create huge impact. And I agree with you. I think people underestimate like the accountability piece of it.
Mhm.
Like if you have, like you said, the canaries or the champions that are like, I'm gonna check in and be like, hey,
Yeah.
did you do that?
Yep.
Because that's the biggest thing, right? That's why a lot of times people work out in buddy systems, right?
Mhm.
Because, or work out with trainers, because it's like you have that accountability part of it. And I've had that before where like,
Yep.
I have my own wellness stuff that I do for me that I'm pretty dedicated to and self-motivated to do. But the gym, like hard workouts, if I don't have a friend who's going with me, or if I don't have my personal trainer who like I've scheduled with, it's harder for me to go and do it because I don't really want to do it. It's hard, right?
Right.
But having that accountability, like, okay, I got to get up and do it because this person's counting on me. And so I think that having those people that are like, hey, like, and not making it shameful if you didn't, but like,
No,
hey, like, did you do this? Then
right.
you're like, dang it. And now like every time you see them like in the hallway, you're like, God, like I got to do it, right? It's that's
Oh, yeah.
remembering. So no, I like that a lot. Um,
Sometimes you got to chase them down and be like, "Hey, I know you're avoiding me. Where are we at with this?" And I mean, you hit a good point on the accountability buddy. And that's not just an exercise. I mean, you can use that through all different disciplines or all different facets of life. I mean, so and when you talk about when we look at the research and the data that shows, a lot of these programs, whether they're, the Jenny Craigs or the Weight Watchers or all those, a lot of the success within those is because of accountability. There's somebody else there that you now have to that you're relying upon, and they're relying upon you in order to make sure that your successes is moving along. So the personal trainer is another good example of that. Is if you don't show up, whether that motivation is you're going to get charged for that hour, if you show up or not, so
yeah,
you find what it is that keeps that person going and keeps them interested, and capitalize on that in order to keep them progressing in the right direction. And then eventually it becomes pattern, it's momentum, and you keep going. And then you have stumbles, or you go on vacation and you don't do it for a week, and you got to come back and you're like, "Ah, man, I've got to start all over again." But you just keep going, and you find that motivation somehow, some way, or you find that whatever that is that's going to keep you going, whether it's internally or externally. I think that helps out significantly.
yeah. And I really like when you said just keep going. Like sometimes that's what it is, right? Because I think so often, and I'm so guilty of this, but you're like, oh, I don't feel like it. I'm tired. I'm stressed. But if you can have the mentality of like, just put one foot in front of the other, regardless if you want to do it, if you feel like doing it or not, like your wellness is so important. Like our health is so important. And
Mhm.
there's no one out there. I have never met anyone out there that's like, I just want to feel sick,
Right. Yeah.
or like I just like want to be in pain, or I just, don't want to feel good when I'm older. Like no one wants that. Everyone wants to feel good for as long as possible. And so I think it's like we said before, that one foot in front of the other. How can you just keep that momentum going? And then give yourself grace. If there are times like I am right there on the vacation thing, I just got back from California yesterday. I was not great because I had a lot of really good tacos out there. And I had a cheeseburger and I didn't work out. And so, I got to get back on track with that now that I'm back in my routine. And I think just giving yourself grace and being like, you know what? Yeah, I didn't maybe eat the best the last 3, 4 days, but like I'm gonna just keep putting one foot in front of the other. I wanted to ask you because you have a smaller organization.
Mhm.
What are some of the challenges that you're seeing in incorporating wellness with a small, tight-knit crew?
The challenges I think is within any organization is they don't have the funds to be able to go and buy a
Mm,
program or to be able to bring in an expert or bring in somebody that where there's a financial piece to it.
yeah,
Um, all the non-financial things that we can do, and or the things that it's from a leadership aspect of things of how are we treating our people and how are we bringing cultures that promote mental health and well-being or encouraging them in their personal lives to be able to do it physically or spiritually or with their family and that type of stuff.
right. Yeah, that makes sense. You talked a little bit just now about different areas of wellness, right? We've talked about the mental side, we've talked about the physical side. You just mentioned financial. And one of the things that we know is also important is the home wellness side of things. And I think I think all of it bleeds into home life, right? Like if you're stressed, if you're not feeling good physically, mentally, but also financially, if you're struggling and you're stressed, that's all going to bleed into your personal life as well. And when you and I talked offline, you talked about the sacrifices of this career and especially the impact that that had on your family and on your home life. Could you talk a little bit about maybe some of the challenges that you've seen, and then maybe some strategies that have helped you for anyone who's listening that might, be going through some of the similar things like that helped you to find more of that work-life balance or to promote a healthier home life?
Yeah, and that's an area where I'm going to be bad at because I those are the things that I recognize after the fact. Right? I mean, I wanted to always be I wanted to master the whatever capacity that I was in, and I wanted to be the best in everything that I could do. So I pushed myself as hard as I possibly could, no matter what assignment that I was in or whatever capacity. And that meant I had to sacrifice, the personal things, the home life and stuff like that. I can't remember if I told you, but I mean, one of the regrets that I have is when my middle daughter was she was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years old, and I was in the drug task force. I came home and I was so exhausted because we had been going for days on end, and I was here playing with her on the floor in her room, and I had fallen asleep.
Mm,
And I think my wife had taken a picture of the daughter crawling over me, and I look back at that picture and I think back of look those times, those formidable days and years, when she was really young, and I missed out on those opportunities because I was trying to, you know, do the best thing that I could possibly do at work when I sacrificed, home. And how is that going to eventually impact her as she gets older? Uh, you know, Missing certain things when you're younger. I tried to, as much as I possibly could, be be at everything for my kids. Whether that's choir recitals or tryouts and those types of things, or even attending if they asked me to go to Veterans Day, assemblies and things like that, so that I could be a part because of the time frames when I was gone. Um, and unfortunately, this career is one of those where you don't get to pick and choose which ones you get to go to sometimes. I remember early on in my career, somebody had said, "Hey, birthdays don't always have to be on birthdays, or Christmases don't always have to be on Christmases. You can celebrate those things as a family, but maybe not on the traditional way that the rest of society does or other people do. So I tried to embrace that as much as possible. I mean, we don't always celebrate Christmas on Christmas or Thanksgiving on Thanksgiving. But we still try to recognize those family functions and those things and do them in a way that we can celebrate them within our family. But it doesn't always mesh up with everybody else's schedules and life and everything else, which then can be challenging in other ways. But um, yeah, I'm probably a really bad example of things I not sacrificing, family or sacrificing health and because of the profession. And so that's one of those areas where if I could rewind time and go back and do it again, uh, I would I would try to prioritize and not sacrifice family time because of work.
I think that's the beauty of these conversations. We all have that, right? We all have moments in our life where we look back and we're like, man, if I could do that again, I would choose something different. But by sharing that with other people, it's an opportunity for people who are younger and maybe haven't made those decisions or those, quote unquote mistakes, yet can learn from that. And so, you know, no one is getting through this life unscathed without making a decision that they maybe wish that they didn't.
Sure.
But I think that as a community, we can come together and talk about these things and hope that maybe these conversations can help to change the trajectory and that someone doesn't have to make that same mistake that you did or that I did. And one of
Right.
the things that you said to me that I thought was really powerful, you said that the hardest part is not making the same mistakes.
Yes.
What did you mean by that exactly?
Well, that's a prime example of it is so, you know, it, as as time evolved, sometimes we hope we have learned better from the experiences that we had. And how do you not keep repeating them?
Yeah.
Uh, and so some of that is okay, I learned this, but how do I make sure that I don't have that same issue come up later on? And I say that, but now in a capacity as being a chief that has demand in all different directions, and I struggle sometimes with how do I prioritize the needs of the organization, the needs of my officers, and my own needs and my family time, and my own, mental health and everything else that goes along with it. Because I would rather sacrifice myself to make sure that the organization and my officers are getting what they need, or I'd say my staff in general. I only say officers because I only have one other FTE that's civilian staff, so it could be a small agency. But it's how do you not be hypocritical by telling people, hey, learn from my mistakes while I'm repeating the same mistake again.
Right.
I don't want to call it a mistake, but it's, learn from what I learned here during this experience, but you don't do this in yours while I'm still doing it. So it's a struggle and it's a balance to really blend that and try to have a balance and have some sort of normalcy. And it's easy on the major things where you're like, oh, that was really bad. I'm not going to do that again, and we don't ever do it again. But it's the day-to-day routine, mundane things where they creep in, and next thing prime example, this week alone, my wife is a police officer as well. Well, we haven't seen. Last night was the first time we saw each other since Sunday night because of incident that happened in her jurisdiction and her being gone and working and then conflicting schedules and everything else. So how do you make time for yourself and how do you make time for your relationships in the mix of chaos and of life happening and calls and different things that take us away from our families and everything else. But how do you reprioritize that when you can? And sometimes it's just that is when can you do that? And you make the time and you make it a priority. So even if it's putting it on the calendar to say, hey, this Friday we're going to go on a date night, or this Friday we're going to do family movie night to schedule that time so it's uninterrupted and make it a priority. Sometimes we've got to go to that extreme in the mix of everything that's going on.
What you said about how can you tell other people that it's important for them to do X, Y, Z, but then not doing that for yourself is so relatable. I think that anyone who's listening to that can recognize that. And I've done that too, where I've had to check myself and be like, if I'm going to tell people to do this, like I also have to be doing that for me.
Yeah.
And I like the tactical advice of like, because here's the thing, like there's always gonna be challenges, right? And perfection's an illusion, and there's always gonna be things that happen multiple times, maybe, but I like you saying we have awareness around it, and then sometimes we just have to schedule it. Like sometimes it's like it has to be a priority for us to recognize that these things need to be on the calendar and be like structured for us to make sure that we're prioritizing our time together. And
Yep.
but I thought that was so relatable. I'm like, oh, I think everyone listening to this can relate to because it's easy to point at everyone else and be
Oh,
like,
yeah.
you should be doing this, but then like, are you doing that in your life? I know we're reaching kind of the end here, but I wanted to ask you what is next? You are running for sheriff. So
I
tell us
am.
a little bit about
I am.
that.
So a perfect segue into, hey, are you balancing home and work life and everything else?
Right.
Uh, yeah, so I feel that I've been called to go to the next level and run for sheriff within my county. Uh, it's again, as I got into this profession, I felt it was a calling for me to get into this profession. I feel that God's called me to now serve in this next capacity. So yeah, so I'm our election actually is until next year, so I'm a little ahead of things, but I'm learning a lot, and I'm now trying to reprioritize things and reevaluate what's the new normal and how can we balance ourselves, my family life and everything else with now running an organization and running a campaign and trying to get out and talk to people and expressing who I am and why am I doing it and what do I bring to the table and what my vision is and what I want to do. But ultimately, I think that we need to have good, solid leaders in these positions to effectively make change within the law enforcement community and within organizations to help, move the profession down the line and be better than we were. And kind of a personal motto that I go by is if I dwell on everything bad that's happened in the past, I can't live for the future. And another one is be better tomorrow than I was today. So
Mhm.
how can I help out and give back in a different capacity, in a different way? And that's part of the reason why I'm running for sheriff, is to be able to now step it up to the next level in in help out in other ways that I can't do in my current capacity.
I love it.
Yeah.
What words of wisdom would you give to someone who's earlier in their career? In the context of wellness, I know you said a lot of things just now about being better and, striving to be the best version of yourself, but what words of wisdom would you share with someone who's early in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that has helped you along the way.
So one of the most impactful things for me was a couple of years ago. We have a family. I'll call it family. It's my brother-in-law's dad, who was retired as an assistant chief from another organization. Um, I'd asked him one day, I was like, how did you maintain your sanity being in that organization and going, 25, 30-year career? What did you do to find kind of that piece, that sanity check for you? And for him was he really liked making bamboo um, fly rods, custom fly rods out of bamboo, and the the attention to detail and the focus that he needed to have with that, it allowed him to drown out all of the distractions from work or the other things, and he could focus on that and have a moment to himself. And so I guess in simplicity was his he had a hobby or he had something that allowed him to seek enjoyment and focus and do something outside of the profession that captivated him both mentally and physically. I love to do woodworking projects, and it was that experience. And then this was in 2020, 2021 is when so it wasn't that long ago that I'm having this conversation with this gentleman. And I come to the realization, and so as we're driving back home, I tell my wife, I'm like, yeah, I want to create a woodworking shop. I want to have a place where I can go to unwind from the day, or if the stressors get so much that I can go and not necessarily to escape the family, but have somewhere where I can go that continues a hobby and it continues something that I love doing and I have a passion for. Um, so having something outside of law enforcement that allows you to have a break away from all the stressors and all the chaos and all of the things that come with the profession. I strongly encourage people to find whatever that is, whatever that passion is, and do it, no matter what it is, and don't let people influence you anyway or tease you or razz you, whatever it is that makes you feel good, and that's what you want to do, and it gives you that relief, do it. And I encourage people to do that. So that's a recent thing that I would encourage anybody. And if you can find that early on in your career and maintain that, I think that's something that will help out on longevity. Um, Also maintaining non-law enforcement friends or non-law, people that are, or even somebody that's completely out of the profession. And it's one of the things that I've always done was is maintain relationships outside of law enforcement for twofold. One is you get tired of always talking about work. So that's one reason. The other reason is to maintain my reasonableness standard, being able to say, what would a reasonable person, now being in the profession this long, I'm not the same as what your average citizen would be based upon my training and experience and exposure. So I'm looking at things totally different than what the average person may look at. And so if I could present them with information and say, hey, how would you look at this, or what would you think with this, or if you were a juror on this case, not with divulging information that you shouldn't, but if I give you a hypothetical, how would you look at this? Would you see this as, and get their feedback to it? And so it allows me to maintain grounded and being reasonable within the profession, which is something that helps us out my helped me out throughout my career, but I think would help people throughout their career, is having that breakaway, not just to always be talking about stuff or
Yeah.
being stuck in the profession all the time, because you have to have that mental break, but allows us to be grounded in tune with outside of the profession. Um, the other thing I would tell people it's be motivated, be driven, be passionate about what you're doing, but also set boundaries. Uh,
Mhm.
if you, and that's a struggle that's an issue that I struggle with, is I want to give it all the time. Go, 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 go. And then you get burnt out, or go, 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 and you're sacrificing family, or you're sacrificing your physical health, your mental health. And it's okay to set boundaries, and know what those are and when you need to put them in place, and don't be afraid to do them. Because there's times when, even as myself, or even in positions of leadership throughout my career, uh, I have subjected people to pushing them beyond what their boundary was, what I'm comfortable with their boundaries, or what they're comfortable with, because I didn't know what their boundaries were. So you can be respectful and still push back a little bit, saying, hey, yeah, I haven't had a day off in 7 days, and I've been working 12, 16 hours a day. I need to have some time off. Or as much as I would love to do that assignment over there, I'm not going to put in for, or I'm not going to do those, because it may not be right for you, or whatever the case may be. But having the ability to be motivated, be driven, be focused, be hard charging, but at the same token, protect yourself by putting your own boundaries out there. Be respectful of boundaries. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on here. I really
Oh,
appreciate
thank
your
you for
words of
having me.
wisdom and your focus on wellness. And I wish you all the luck with running for sheriff. I think that that's awesome. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for being
Oh,
here.
thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course.